Okay, so good afternoon, good morning for some. Welcome and welcome back. I am excited to be joined by all of you. Welcome to all of our new attendees. I'm super excited you could be here with us. Welcome back to all my repeat attenders. This is the final episode in our three-part webinar series. And to those of you who have been in the conversation with us for episodes 1 and 2, thank you for all your comments, your strong ideas, and your commitment, honestly, to unlearning a few things with us. So give yourselves a round of applause. We have made it. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jaqua Wilson, and I am an advocate for youth, former alumni, and a professional in the field. I'm here today with my wonderful co-host, fellow youth advocate and policy advisor, Ms. Carrie Richmond. So honored to be with her from American Academy of Pediatrics. Ms. Carrie, did you want to say hi to everyone really quick?
Hello, everyone. Great to be here.
Yay. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful thing to have you here with me. So before we dive in today's purpose for the episode, I want to reflect on some of the themes that we shared previously. Episode 2 was really inspiring. Honestly, I left feeling connected to the work that needs to be done and to really help my community unlearn. I felt enlightened by my peers in the field, and we conducted a brief poll here at the Institute. We value and really want to know what you guys have to say. So we asked for your thoughts when we conducted the poll on how to communicate and keep the communication flowing so that we can continue to have these conversations. And 90% of you voted for more webinars like this. You guys wanted to hear from us and have these conversations with us. So we were overjoyed by the poll results. And now we want to ask you guys in the chat to drop in some ideas of topics that you all would like us to discuss or what you guys would like to talk about in this space. And so while you guys share those ideas with us, I want to also do just a brief recap for our new audience, the people who have just joined us. So in episode 1, while the chat is going, we wanted to know why do we need to recreate a child welfare system, and one that prioritizes, family well-being. From episode 1, I learned honestly why it's important for us to understand the people we serve and the conditions that families face. For episode 2, honestly, we focused on the how, and I was blown away by the efforts taking place nationally. And I was really inspired by the strategies being used to reduce the number of children ever entering foster care. And now that we're in episode 3, I'd like to take a deeper dive on some of the conditions families face and the community around them. So we want to know, how we can create a more just and equitable child welfare system for all, and for all those youth who are removed. We know that foster care is not going to disappear overnight, right? We know that we still have families and children to serve. So we still have a way to go, and we want to know how to better serve these families that these children come from. So Carrie, I'd love to hear your thoughts, honestly, on the current systems, climate, and how you're feeling today. I'm so glad you could be here with me to co-host.
Thanks, Jaqua. It's so good to co-host with you. And as Jaqua mentioned, I'm also an advocate in the space with the American Academy of Pediatrics as the manager of child welfare policy, and also lead a startup organization called Foster Strong, whose mission is to rewrite the narrative in foster care using our own experience. All of us in our organization were alumni of foster care and really hoping to shed a light on the triumph that comes after trauma. And so as someone who has also experienced foster care, it's really exciting to be here with Jaqua today. And one of the things that we have been talking about a lot leading up to this event is that there's a shift in the power dynamics that are happening, and that it's really refreshing to be asked to co-host and lead the discussion here instead of being just another seat on the panel asked to speak about our trauma. And for me, that feels like a really significant step forward for leveling out what equity looks like within our system. So Jaqua, would love to hear your thoughts on that front too.
Um, Honestly, I just feel like I cannot tell you how many times we have been invited to the conversation and just given the mic and asked to share our experiences, and not really given the power to change, and be a part of that conversation in that way. So I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I'm super excited that we have this platform and this ability, as former alumni of the system, to share and be in this space together.
Yeah, and as we dive into this conversation about what does it look like to create a just and equitable system, this idea that has come up a lot leading up to this event is that oftentimes you hear people who are advocating saying, we need former foster youth to have a seat at the table. We need birth parents to have a seat at the table. We need foster parents to have a seat at the table. But truly, the table would not exist if it weren't for our kids and our youth. And so when we're thinking about how do we really prioritize their well-being, well, it so closely hinges on their attachments to the adults around them, their family, who they see as somebody who is caring and consistent and reliable. And so when we're thinking about how we prioritize that well-being, we really have to be having more seats at the table. We have to build a longer table that encompasses the entire village that it takes to raise a child. So we're really excited about where we're going with this discussion. And, 2020 has been quite a year, but it has also been such a great opportunity for us to reflect and to truly unlearn a lot. So that's really what we're here to do today. So Jaqua, should we get started with our question for the audience?
Yes, I would love to just pick a few of you guys' brain and ask you all our poll question. So it's going to pop up on the screen here shortly. How would you rate how just and equitable our current child welfare system is for our children and families? Just, it's a scale of 1, not very, to 5, very. And I just want you guys to take a minute and just think about, the things that we've talked about in episode 1 and 2, and the conditions, and even the things that Carrie shared and touched on about community, and how it takes a sense of that to really produce a good experience for the families that we serve. And so gonna take a moment to check to see what the results are like. And so as we see, it's not very just and equitable. This is from what you guys are telling us. And so 42% of you all are saying, no, it's not. And so I'd ask you guys to just take a moment and share in the chat, what are you doing to make foster care a better experience for kids and families? Share your practices, share your best practices and your resources with one another. And while we do that, I'd like to pass it to Carrie to introduce our panelists for today.
Great. Well, we have an amazing panel lined up here. Really excited for you all to meet them. Some of them are returning vets for this Unlearning series, beginning with Shrounda Selivanoff, who is the Public Policy Director at the Children's Home Society of Washington. Jessica Crisp, who is a licensed foster parent, who you should have seen her amazing video about her own journey and her husband's story, about really standing for families and reunification and what that looks like. We have our fearless leader, Matt Anderson, who is truly the reason that we are all here today. And last but certainly not least, we have Jerry Milner, who is the Associate Commissioner at the Children's Bureau. What a lineup, and so excited to dive in. Jaqua, are we ready?
Yes. So before we get started, I just want to kind of focus my attention a little bit to the chat, because it is going crazy right now. I'm seeing a lot of ways that you guys are telling us that you're doing the work within your own communities, and some of the practices that you are doing. One thing that stuck out to me was normalization. And I know, speaking from my own experience, that's one of the big key things to to experiencing separation and trauma. We don't normalize, the things that families go through and the situations or the circumstances that lead them to these. In episode 1, I remember sharing a bit of my family struggle to communicate. And at the time that I entered foster care, prior to my removal, I was in kinship care with a sibling. And neither of us really had the support, that we needed to be a stronger family unit. The service that was provided instead was enforcing like even less communication, between us. And all the middlemen and women in between us really didn't contribute to me having a successful relationship even after care. And so when we're talking about normalizing and stuff, I'd really like to hear from the panelists, what would a more just and equitable experience look like for kids and families? Ms. Shrounda, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, what do we need to unlearn to get there?
Thank you so much, Jaqua, and thank you for the opportunity to be on this platform with others. First of all, I just want to say out to everyone, I wear so many hats, it's difficult to differentiate where I'm coming from. And some may know and some may not know, I'm actually a kinship caregiver also. And I've been caring for my grandson since birth. And I've had a very, very unique experience wearing that hat. I want to just kind of go back and first of all, just say, if we can't acknowledge what is happening in child welfare, we can't change it. And we have a way of saying things so that it's palpable. But I really want to be bold and brave in this space and say that the system in its current framework is racist. And it is a hard thing to say out loud. I think people get incredibly uncomfortable hearing such a term and extremely want to defend it, which in itself denotes that there is something wrong. And I think that we have to be bold and brave and say there's something incredibly wrong with the way that child welfare operates. And it targets families in a way that leaves them absolutely devastated from the consequences of being involved. And so one of the things when I'm looking at inequitable experiences is acknowledging that that there's inequities that are happening. As a kinship caregiver, I had a profound experience recently, and I didn't even know what was happening at the time, but I've had some time to process and kind of get to the other side. And so living in America and recognizing that there are outcomes that are predominantly assigned to certain demographics. And I was thinking about my son, who's currently experiencing some adversity. I'm caring for his child. And I was on this panel and this woman started to talk about a kinship experience. And I had to pull myself off of camera because I was so consumed with emotions. It was the first time someone had started to articulate what it's like to be a kinship in this system. While I watched my son navigate other systems that, in some respects, data says he was destined to get there, I want to just talk about what it feels like to be a kinship and the lack of support and understanding of what actually happens. We have a lot of messaging, and the messaging is we want to get kids to kin, but the resources and the funding do not say that. It says, here's your child, you guys figure it out. And in the punitive nature of child welfare, sometimes I feel penalized. And I feel penalized in a way that is difficult to articulate because there's a place that says you're deserving of what's happening to you in this moment, like you've played a part in it. And while I certainly have played a part in it, I haven't played all the parts in it. And as I get more educated and I get more understanding of what the complexities and the drivers that actually get people to some type of future that they didn't necessarily want for themselves, I'm confronted with the guilt, the shame, the isolation, the completely feeling alone, and then wanting and needing to step up. So when I'm talking about those equitable experiences for families, what I can tell you is that kinship caregivers really need support, right? They take on a large percentage of children. And here in Washington State, 43% of families are with kinship. And currently, lower percentages receiving the types of subsidies that foster care parents get. So one of the things I'd like to see is equity in the way that we support families, that if they find themselves in child welfare, how are we supporting those members so that they can keep their family members close, but also recognize they're having an experience. I never wanted a grandson in child welfare. I never wanted myself in child welfare. And the idea that I would be deserving or that I, wanted any of this really speaks to the way that we see and treat families of color. My heart is as connected to my child as your heart is connected to your child. And I think the more that we get a commonality and get some compassion and understanding for what is happening for families, the more that we will actually be able to do something that actually creates an equitable and a experience that says you matter. We understand families are complex. We understand that your heart would not want this for your child because we wouldn't want this I wouldn't want this for my child. And in an effort of that commonality and camaraderie, we will honor your experience by giving you exactly what we would give someone else, and help you to process and walk through this with some grace and dignity instead of some shame and blame and guilt. And I don't think that a lot of times we recognize that kinship caregivers carry their own burdens in this, and that as members of society, we should be coming around folks and not placing them on an island and making them feel like they've done something that's lacking, because all we are is just human beings having a human experience, which means there's a variety and a difference of the way we show up and what we experience. But at the end of the day, our core beliefs and our emotions and feelings are universal. And I think the more that we can start to approach this work from understanding, that is the way to start to create an equitable experience for families.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, Shonda. I really agree strongly. We need to recognize the experience that our families and our kinship providers are facing, and we need to serve them with compassion and understanding of their situations and really meet them where we are so that we can better serve. Thank you for that. I think the chat agrees, and the participants in the audience are in agreement with what you're saying. And yeah, so can we hear some more thoughts on that from our other panelist?
Yeah, I'm excited to jump in, and I appreciate everything that has been shared, and just feel so strongly the level of empathy needs to be there in general to help our entire system. And I know that I'm sharing from a slightly different perspective as a foster parent coming into this instead of kinship care. But part of what I noticed during our year and 5 months of having a child in our care that was later reunified, part of what I saw was just the importance of my own unlearning process that I needed to do in all of this. So I think all of us have to look at our roles within this entire process and say, let's do a quick self-assessment. What am I honestly bringing to the table here? And what do I truly have the child and the family's best interests at heart? And I think when I went into this process as a foster parent, my desire was honestly to grow my family, was to prove to others that I would have the ability to provide for a child who is in care, who comes into our home. And so my desire wasn't truly focused on reunification. It seemed even locally that the climate was reunification is the goal, but we don't know if that's going to happen. That's kind of how things were stated. But really what we've got to do with all of these families experiencing this hardship is to try to see things from their perspective, let the walls come down, and join with them as a support system. I think we truly have to embrace shared parenting. And I think some of us can throw around that phrase at times because it's just something that we say within these systems, is shared parenting, like it's this concept, but really living that out makes the biggest difference for the family, and especially for the child in care, and for their overall trajectory for what their future looks like. We had an incredible opportunity to build a relationship with the child in care London and with her family. And over time we built trust, but honestly, it was hard in the beginning. We were all defensive. We were all unsure of how this was supposed to work. And we felt afraid to communicate. What we found was that it was best for our little one, the more that we as foster parents could engage and support her parents, and not just her parents, but her grandparents, her aunts, her uncles. We all became this one unit over time. And the way that we were successful was by truly humbling ourselves and making ourselves vulnerable. And I feel like that is so hard to do in this climate, but anything we can do to show a little bit of vulnerability, to show we truly are human and we can really impact others and make a difference in someone else's life versus what my agenda is. So I feel like when we can shift towards that reunification, we share the same goal, then it's not that we're two separate families, the foster family and the child's family, loving the child or working together for the child. It's that we're really one unit that can work in such a cohesive way that long-term will impact everyone that's involved.
Wow. Thank you for those thoughts. I know that must have been a hard and a very unlearning process for you and your family to come into this thinking things are one way, and then to have to unlearn that process for what's best for the child. And that's the kind of village that we're talking about when we say that we need a community and a longer table for our youth and care, and for our families who may experience this. And you touched on something, even talking about reunification is the plan, but that may not happen. And it just really speaks to, that almost unsaid that this family is deserving of this idea, and we need to really work to unlearn that and to come together as a community. So I'm really interested to hear also what our fellow panelist, Mr. Milner, has to say about this topic. He's been a leader in this conversation as well.
Let me see if I can, am I actually off of mute there?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're live.
Well, yeah, let me just say very quickly what a pleasure it is to be on this particular panel. Every one of you who are talking, and as I see so many familiar names popping up on the chat, I just want you to know you inspire me every single day, and it's a true pleasure here. The whole idea of creating a more just and equitable experience, it's what our mission has been in the Children's Bureau for almost 4 years now. We want to create the kind of a system out there where we have supportive, community-based environments where family kids can get essential needs met. Sometimes these are basic concrete needs rather than clinical interventions. Before a call to the child welfare hotline is even necessary, and where families don't perceive the threat of losing their kids if they reveal their vulnerabilities and actually ask for help. I think a more just and equitable experience would include enforcement of so many of the protections that are already on the books out there, like reasonable efforts to prevent removals and seeking out and using the voices of the families and the youth that our system is supposed to benefit. And as Jessica has already pointed out, a more just and equitable system would look like having our foster care system serving as a support to entire families, not just a substitute for families. And like Shrounda has mentioned, supporting kinship families with the same level of supports as unrelated caretakers out there. I love the concept of what do we have to unlearn, because almost every conversation that I have with somebody about transforming our child welfare system leads me back to the fact that often we aren't even beginning the conversation from the same perspectives there, because we haven't begun to think more broadly than what we know about our current system. One of the things that I think we absolutely have to unlearn as the child welfare agency is that we always know best. Quite honestly, we don't always know best. Families are the experts on their needs and their circumstances. Youth are the experts on what their experiences have been and their needs. And we have to get to the place where we exercise the humility of understanding that we've not walked in someone else's shoes or experienced their trauma or their day-to-day struggles. And that in fact, we can learn from the people that we serve. Another thing that we have to unlearn is that it always has to be complicated. We create more funding opportunities and more programs out there, but we also create them with more and more restrictions on how many people can be served, how deep in crisis you must be before you can benefit, the amount, the dosage of those services. It doesn't have to be so complicated. It can be as simple as creating those conditions out there where families can receive kindness from people in their own communities, people who know them, people who care about them, the kind of kindness that can help a family to avoid the crisis that often leads them to the child welfare door. I think from a leadership position in the federal government, we have to unlearn that we cannot trust communities with flexible funding and with flexibility in our rules and our regulations. We have to learn that communities, in fact, know their families better than we can know them in Washington, D.C. or in our state capitals or wherever. And we have to learn to trust them to be able to meet those needs. I think we have to unlearn, quite honestly, that prevention is somebody else's business, a nice thing to do, and that it's not really the business of the child welfare system. Prevention has to be the business of all of us. If we want to change the experiences of families, of children and youth, we have to learn that it has to be our business. We also have to unlearn that physical safety alone is simply not good enough. Every one of us needs well-being. And we can be safe without achieving well-being. And if we want to break some of those very difficult historical intergenerational patterns of trauma, disruption that our families experience over and over again, we have to begin as a system to get serious about addressing the well-being of both the parents and the children. I think we have to unlearn, building on Jessica's remarks, that foster families are merely there to serve the agency's wishes and to follow the rules that we've created, and learn to treat our foster families and our kinship caregivers with respect and as a resource for entire families needing support and help. And the last thing I want to say that I think we have to unlearn is that we have to unlearn that parents are the enemy. Even if they have made some difficult decisions, some bad decisions, or even if they've taken some bad turns in life. And we have to learn that families, parents are our best hope for ensuring the well-being, not only of their families, but of their children. And I think we have to look no further if we want to bring this into focus right now than the very widely publicized, widespread fears that are out there right now in the media, that the pandemic is leading countless children to be abused by their bad parents while they're at home and we don't have other people, mandated reporters, looking over them. That's a real reflection of our values, and it's quite revealing in how we view parents, vulnerable parents in our society, and we have to begin to unlearn that.
Thank you. Wow, those are some really inspiring thoughts and some really concrete ways that we can unlearn what it is that we practice in today's current child welfare state. Matt, would you like to add any additional comments to what Mr. Milner and
Sure.
the other panelists have shared?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Love to. And thank you all. I mean, I'm just soaking it all in here, both what you all have to say and what we're hearing from everybody in the chat. And I think Shrounda, maybe you said brave spaces and courageous spaces. And I think we have to have spaces like this right now. So I hope we're all finding ways to create spaces like this in our own communities, in our own states, in our own organizations, to have difficult conversations about kind of the state of affairs and what do we really want for kids and families? What do we really want for communities? A lot of, kind of leaning into the tough conversations comments here in the chat. And I think we all need to do that. And, I'm inspired by this conversation. And, most of you on this webinar don't know me at all, and you're just getting introduced to me as the director of the Institute for Family, and I am, but I'm also I also serve in a program leadership role at the Children's Home Society, where the Institute is housed. And so I'm in kind of an interesting seat in this conversation, because for the last 5 years, I've been leading our foster care program. And I've learned and unlearned quite a bit over that period of time. And this is a really, really important conversation for me, just personally, as somebody that's responsible for a program that's serving kids in foster care and their families. And so we serve about 1,200 kids a year across our program. And I think, what I've come to realize, that for me and for our program, our organization, what we need to unlearn is actually what our job is. We really need to think seriously about what our job is as foster care child welfare providers. And what are we trying to do? What questions are we asking ourselves? Are we asking ourselves, how do we get better as an organization and as a program? We are. You all met Claire Anderson last week and from Chapin Hall, and we asked her to help us get better. And she did that with a number of other stakeholders. But I think we should be asking ourselves, why do we exist as an organization, as a program? When it comes to families and what families need from us, we need to ask ourselves why we exist. And so in our program team, when we get together and talk, oftentimes, we talk about, we are not in the service of foster care. We don't exist for the purpose of foster care. And foster care is a thing that's happening right now, and it's a necessary role that many of us are playing. But our job needs to be to get kids out of foster care as quickly and safely as possible. And right now, I think, I'm seeing a lot in the chat about funding, funding restrictions and that sort of thing, and that's true. Our funding system is set up right now to pay for foster care. So we have to really be working against the tide right now. And so I was, really excited to hear what Ned and the folks in Colorado and Nebraska had to share with us about how they're trying to really impact on the funding structures and, create opportunities to serve the needs of families and community to prevent foster care in the first place. And that's what we need to be doing. I mean, we need to be preventing foster care in the first place. But when we think about the foster care system as it is today, we need to be incredibly focused on what we've just been hearing about: kinship and reunification. As kids come into the system for the purpose of child protection and keeping kids safe, then we need to be focused on placing with families and focused on reunification. And so for me, that's an unlearning of what my job actually is and what we're actually, supposed to be doing in this work. And so I'll share that thought as what I'm trying to unlearn right now.
Wow. I know that must be great to do in an organization that supports and really centers around family well-being and support. So Carrie, did you have anything that you'd like to add or any comments from just hearing our wonderful panelists share some from their perspectives with some of the things that they need to unlearn to make this a more just and equitable system for all?
Yeah, I mean, phew, so much good stuff in there, and some of the themes that really stood out to me and just hearing those powerful answers was embracing vulnerability, like humility, and how important it is to humble ourselves and do the work of unlearning, which isn't always easy. And then that idea that Shrounda talked about in terms of shame and how we have to stop shaming. And I think as we have this conversation and with 2020 being such a perfect year for reflecting on the ways that we may have contributed to a harmful system, that it is important for us to be accountable to that, but that it is not a moment of shaming, but it's a moment of opportunity. That just like Maya Angelou says, that when you know better, you do better. And so I hope that as we're all sitting here today thinking about what we have to unlearn, that we are seeing this as a path to stepping forward into being better, into really standing as champions for all children and families and really prioritizing family well-being. So with those reflections, I'm curious to hear from our panelists how you all think that we create a more just and equitable experience for children and families, and what's the role of the youth, parent, and family leadership in creating that experience. So what are our action steps there? And Shrounda, I loved what Sandra said on the first webinar, that you always take us to church and you always preach a message. So I'm gonna hand it over to you and let you take the podium to preach.
Well, first of all, I'm just going to tell you, I just tell the truth. And if it resonates for you and touches your soul in a profound way, I couldn't be happier. But my truth is what I've lived and it's what I know. And I think why it feels like we're going to church is because it's universal. There's nothing that separates us. I think a lot of times we put those things between us. We're here to serve one another. And I think we really need to get clear about that, right? I'm not here for me. I'm here for you. And I think that the more that we connect to that, the more that we can actually change things. I want to just take a moment and give a shout out to Jerry Milner and David Kelly. And I remember a few years ago, I came across these two and I was full with nerves. And what I watched in live and living color were these two high-level individuals that conceded space and conceded power. And they opened up the space so that a parent who had nothing but shame and thought little of who and what she could offer, that they created a space that said, you have the most to offer. And how empowering and healing and life-changing that has been. You know, as I tell you about that kinship piece, right? I don't want you to think that my grandson needed a placement. And I was like, absolutely, I'm all about taking in a newborn at 47. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, was to take my grandchild, because I knew what it actually required. And I had to ask myself if I could do that. What was clear to me was that I had a community around me that was going to walk with me. And at some points that community carried me because I was so overwhelmed and exhausted. As we create space for families, we have to be able to open up and recognize that each one of them has a need. And are we willing to actually answer that? So as we concede space and we share power and we have a collective understanding, what I think happens is we build a community so that people can do things that they didn't even think were possible. I think that as we continuously concede that space concede that power, and I actually want to just say it's shared, right? It's a space where each one of us comes with something to give, and we're here to learn and grow with one another. I think that the more that we recognize, and I think earlier someone said, you know, we don't know what's best for families. Man, I need the same thing you do. Right? I need food. I need wheels. I need some money in my pocket, right? I need shelter. Like, that's just universal. As we start to create that equitable experience, right? We've got to actually be able to afford those things too, right? That are universal for each one of us. And if someone doesn't have those things, how are we getting them to those things? I think the way that some of these systems are set up is we have the bare necessities as rewards, right? Food is not a reward. It's essential. Housing is not a reward. It's essential. The more that you bring the youth, the parent, and any person that has an experience to the table, what you're actually saying to them in that moment is I value you, right? I value, you are worth it, you are equal, you have something to offer here, and your voice needs to be here, because I don't know how you know more about my life than I do. I'm living it, right? Like, I'm living it. So we have got to create the space so that people that are having the experience, not only are they telling you about it, but you're taking that information and you're doing something with it, right? You've got to take that space. You've got to include people in it. You have to be able to take the information, drive that back into the community so that you can be responsive to the needs of what people said. But once again, I don't think that this is rocket science. I think at the core of this is it becomes down to deserving and undeserving. And I think that we are founded on a nation that has separated us, and that it is prime time for us to do something different. If you look at anything in the 1800s, I'm going to tell you what, none of those things exist, because we have advanced as a species, right? And we have taken that learning and we have continued to invent and innovate. Love, care, and compassion was foundational in 1800, and it's foundational in 2020. Please let your actions drive that, and know that none of this has changed, right? The problem is we're not changing. We have too much information for us not to. So it becomes deliberate. And I hope that each one of us takes the opportunity to recognize that families, that children, that parents, that kinship, that grandmothers, they just want to be able to take care of their families. And if they don't have the resources or the wherewithal to do it, then let us be the call, because I'm here to serve you, not myself.
Oh, that's so powerful. And your truth is always so beautiful. And I think really hearing you speak, just the words servant leadership come to mind, and how critical that is in doing this work. And I love the way that you talk about communities and the way that they have to wrap around our families. Jessica, you've been so steeped into that work of really showing up for your community. Would love to hear from you.
Thank you. Sorry, my screen was freezing for just a second. Shrounda, that was incredible. And I would love to answer, Carrie, as you're saying, and jump off of what Shrounda was saying. I believe in, as Shrounda was saying, the basic necessities of kindness and compassion that need to drive everything that we're doing. And in turn, what that will lead us to are things that we did not know we were capable of. And I feel like those are some of those aha moments that are life-changing. And for our family, what that looked like was over a year and a half of building a relationship. But to me, what this looks like as far as being a just and equitable system is that the day that our little one was reunified with her joyful extended family, that was not the end. And if we show kindness and compassion through this process to these family members, you cannot help but join together. Even if you have nothing else in common with people, you will find common ground. And it allows you in the end to have these long relationships, or the potential for some type of long involvement, which allows support structures to remain in place. One thing that I feel so strongly about that is so difficult is realizing the day reunification happens for that family. That means any other support structure is pretty much gone. For the most part, the foster family would say, goodbye, we're done, the child's home, okay, we're stepping away. But what they really need is someone in our situation who left a 10-month-old and then suddenly one day becomes the parent of a 3-year-old with not much time in between to be able to navigate all of it. There had to be a way to help her as her mother know that she could feel confident in this role, and that we also believed in her, and that we would help carry her through this process. So if anyone had said before, hey, you're going to end up with a 3-4 year plus relationship with this family that you met through foster care, would that happen? I would say there's no way that's going to happen, because everyone wants to kind of close the door on that part of their life that's so hard. But what's happened here is it's become a normal part of our family now. And we have the opportunity with our little one and her family and extended family. We see them regularly. We do birthdays together. We do baby showers together. We do all of these things together. And all of this came out of not me being an amazing person, because honestly, I'm not. This came out of the fact that we showed kindness and compassion to someone in their time of need. And what you can see is that you're able to help nurture something in the end that allows these individuals who are stuck in this really horrible, painful system, they're able to thrive in a way in the end. And if we continue to stand by them and build a community that, as Shrounda was saying, carries them, carry me, let's carry one another, because together we can do this. Separately, if we pull out all the scaffolding, the cycle can continue, and we've got to stop how this continues to roll. So if we want to put the brakes on that, we've got to join together in that way and practically live out that compassion, live out that empathy, and tell people respectfully, I hear you, you are heard, you are seen, we can do this together.
And I love what you said, that, you know, when we do this, it leads us to things we didn't know we had the capacity to hold. And that, I think your family is such a great example of growing your capacity to love in a new way, growing your capacity and your understanding of what family looks like and what family means. And you all are certainly an example of what it looks like to build a longer table. And as we're all talking today, it's like, I get this image of, for too long in child welfare, we have played musical chairs where we're ripping chairs away when we can't afford to do that any longer. We need more people to be wrapping around these families and these children. So thank you for that answer. And I'd love to transition to Jerry as someone who's in a leadership role. What does this look like for you?
Well, first of all, let me say how completely inadequate I feel after following Shrounda. I always feel inadequate following you, Shrounda, and Jessica. Your firsthand experience really is beyond whatever I can bring to the table here. But from a more organizational perspective and how I perceive the leadership role in this area, to get to a more just and equitable experience, we've got to get serious about what our vision is. Just like Matt said earlier, he has to unlearn what his job is. I think we have to unlearn what our vision is. Our vision has to address whole families. This is not unusual, but earlier today, I heard a state child welfare leader expounding a very well-intentioned vision that essentially is a rescue the child approach. And never once did I hear anything about strengthening families, strengthening communities, supporting families to care for their children. That's more typical than not, and it hasn't changed, to be quite honest, in half a century. And that kind of a vision has not gotten us to where we want to go, or where our families want and need to go. The vision has to be stronger families who can care for their children, stronger communities, and then we can get serious about how to implement that vision, because vision without action is just a bunch of words that don't really mean anything. A few people have noted funding. To get to a better experience for children, our funding has to match our vision and our goals. If foster care is our goal, Matt has alluded to this, our funding matches it perfectly right now, because that's what we can spend money on. If prevention is our goal, if strengthening families is our goal, then our funding does not match that goal at all. Our current funding, to be very blunt, essentially a bet against our most vulnerable families, our most overrepresented children and families. We need the flexibility to be able to meet their needs as they define those needs, where they are, with not only kindness and compassion, but also with justice, so that they have full benefit of what the system can offer and provide to them. Central to all of this is our capacity to listen to the voices of parents, youth, children, and to act on those voices. As I said earlier, we should not presume to know their experiences if we've not walked in those shoes. We have to integrate those opportunities, integrate the opportunities, I should say, for their voices in all of our work on an ongoing basis. It can't be just tokenism. It can't be review and comment on things that we've already done. It has to be an integrated, ongoing way of doing our work. And I don't think it's a system we have really given in ourselves to sharing that power, as Shrounda has made such eloquent reference to already. I think part of the way we get to a better system is we have to give up the notion that child welfare has to be the face of everything that involves our children and our families. We have to embrace our prevention partners, our community members, other organizations, formal and informal, as equal partners in creating the kind of child and family well-being system that can serve our families well. That involves surrendering so much of that power that Shrounda has already mentioned to communities, to families, to design the kinds of systems that will best meet their needs, and then have the utter guts to go after the kind of funding that's needed to support those programs, rather than staying married to unlimited foster care at the expense of supporting families. David and I visited last year with a family support center in the Bronx that was just being kicked off in a particular community there. One of the things that I took away from that is that they won't offer new services through the family support center, even if they sound like a good idea, without the concurrence of the community who will be the recipient of those services. I admire that kind of commitment so much there. I think that we have to, we made references to this, if we want to get to a different experience, we have to organize at the national, the state, the local level to address seriously the relationship between poverty and the number one reason that children enter our foster care system, which is neglect. We have to come to the understanding that even financially poor parents can be good parents to their children. Many times, as others have already noted, they need those concrete basic supports in order to do what needs to be done for their children. But we have got to address that relationship and stop sweeping that under the rug and blaming our parents for not having all the resources that they actually need out there.
Thank you for that, Jerry. Thank you. And the vision without action is just a bunch of words really stood out to me. And I love what you said about there needs to be shared power. There needs to be shared vision. That's really what's going to carry us into a more intentional place where we don't have tokenization anymore, where we have families that feel well supported and feel safe to come be vulnerable and say what they need, and that you have communities that step up to show up for them. And I know that Matt is such a big visionary and he speaks about vision a lot. So Matt, would love to hear your thoughts here.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, vision without action. So I'm not going to talk about vision so much. Actually, I want to share some more concrete things, I hope anyway. But it is important to have vision, and vision has to be followed by leadership, and that leadership has to be equitable, right? Diverse, equitable leadership. The most diverse teams are the most successful teams, right? So build your teams with diversity in mind to get the job done better and faster and in a more just way, I would say. But and I would encourage everybody, take these conversations into your own organizations, your own communities, and find ways to do the next steps of the action. But I think there are a few things that come to mind about how do we create a more just and equitable system. And so one, I think, is incredibly simple that we can all start doing today, and it starts with language. So let's start using parents and family instead of bio parents and bio mom and biological family. I think as soon as we use the term bio mom, we have made mom other, and we have separated her on a much deeper level than distance from her children, for her and for her children and for us. I don't think it's healthy for us to refer to parents as biological parents. And so I would suggest let's start using parents. Like Shrounda said, parents love their children, and their children love their parents. And sometimes it's not a safe, healthy relationship, and we intervene, but that doesn't change the fact that they love each other. And we need to really start to use different language. I think Jessica, I don't think Jessica's a foster parent. Technically she's licensed as a foster parent, but maybe she's a parent success coach. And maybe we should use terms like that really describe the goal that we have in mind, in terms of the role that somebody like Jessica plays. I think that, so that's one thought. Another thought is, and we might be able to drop this one in chat. There's a new, and maybe it just was dropped. Oh yeah, Trent's on it. So there's a new toolkit that just came out. Children's Trust Fund Alliance and QPI and Youth Law Center and Casey. So I would take a look at that, and it's a reunification shared parenting toolkit. So let's implement practices that empower our staff and empower our parent success coaches to help parents reunify with their children. Let's really start to implement some new practices, and we can start doing that. I think that, how do we create a more just and equitable system? Well, if we have an unjust system, it was probably designed to be that way. And I don't know if anybody on this call designed it to be that way. I don't think that's true, but it was designed to be that way. So let's design it to be just and equitable. And I think we can all start doing that even in our own organization. So I think we can think about, what is our practice? How have we organized our practice? And what decisions have we made about how we go about doing our work? Or are we just doing the things that we've always done? And do we need to step back? And it's hard because foster care is a crisis-driven, under-resourced, overworked profession. It's the hardest job in the world, I think. But we still have to take time to step back and rethink and redesign the work that we do in a way that's more just and more equitable, that's maybe not built on white middle-class values. And it's an inclusive process to redesign our work. And so if you have a table where you're going to redesign your work, take Carrie's analogy and stretch the table longer. Make sure you have a diverse team. Make sure there are parents, there are youth, there are all kinds of stakeholders at your table helping you design the work that you're doing. And then commit to it, right? A lot of us as organizations do plans, and we have really nice plans, but we don't always follow through on our plans. So, design your practice, be committed to your practice, and really follow through on what you're trying to do. I think those are some things that we can do, but I think at the same time, these conversations have focused a lot on how are we going to prevent foster care in the first place. And I think, we all have to have that front and center. I don't know if that's the job alone of child welfare to prevent foster care in the first place. I think, we've heard it, Jerry and others have said it, we need to be partnering together, or we need to be advocating on behalf of ourselves and the families that we serve, and kind of ringing the alarm bell of the public health crisis that I think foster care is. Letting folks know that we're concerned about the families that we serve. And we want to see, the funds liberated to do different kind of work. We want to see partnerships coming together to prevent and strengthen families. And I think we can do that. We can do that as child welfare folks. We can raise those concerns. So those are some things that we can do. I think I'm just noticing time and want to make sure we're respectful of everybody's time. So I'll turn it back over to our co-hosts to start to kind of wrap us up.
Well, thank you, Matt. Yes, so many good things in there. Language matters so much, and changing the narrative, changing the way that we do this work. Always so grateful for your leadership and the work that you're doing with the Institute for Family. And we are grateful for everyone's answers. And I think as we look ahead to 2021, we're in this month where everyone starts to get their vision boards ready and their New Year's resolutions ready. So as we do start thinking about those things, let's keep this at the forefront. Let's step into this new year ready to do the work. So before we completely wrap up, we're going to pop up a poll question. And then because of time, Matt, I'm just going to hand it back over to you, and maybe you can read out our results from the poll. But one more question for our audience today. Are you or your organization actively working towards creating a more just and equitable foster care system? Go ahead and let us know, and maybe share some of the ways you are doing that or what's holding you back in the chat. And Matt, I will pass it back to you.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Carrie. And thanks to everybody for being with us again. You might not see my face. I don't know how this works, but I see the poll question, so I'll slide over. But thanks to our co-hosts, Jaqua, Carrie, amazing job today, kind of keeping us all together here. And to all of our guests, Jessica, Shrounda, Jerry, thank you for having this conversation with us. And I do want to say too, Jerry, for your leadership and your vision over the last few years, just want to share my personal appreciation. And you have led a conversation that's needed and created space for important conversations. So thank you for that. And thanks to everybody that's on today. And we're just getting started as the Institute for Family. This is really our first effort at putting ourselves out in the world and hosting conversations. We want to do more of these. So please reach out to us, share in the chat, share through the email address that we put up a couple times. Let us know what's on your mind. Let us know what you want to hear in terms of next webinar topics. 89% of you want more webinars. So in a Zoom heavy world, I suppose we'll do more webinars in 2021 and keep these brave spaces open for important conversations. And keep a lookout. A lot of you have asked about these webinars being recorded. They are recorded. They will go up on our website, instituteforfamily.org. So you'll be able to find these next week. All the resources that we're collecting from our guests that we're sharing and talking about, we're going to host those on our website as well.